Hi, we're going to talk about how much the upcoming election matters for your investments. My name is Bridget Sullivan Mermel, and I'm a fee-only financial planner in Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm John Scherer. I'm a fee-only planner in Middleton, Wisconsin. And I'm excited about today's episode of Friends Talk Financial Planning. I mean, one of the things you get to now here, October, 3 or 4 weeks before the election, and I'm hearing a lot of people, Bridget, ask about or make comments. It's not even questions. It's sort of like, well, geez, let's wait till after the election and find out what goes on. And, after the election, we can do these things. And so it's the idea like, hey, the election's important for a lot of reasons, but specifically for money and for financial planning, I'm getting those. I don't know if you get questions about the election or things as how it affects your clients' finances.
Yeah, I think people think that it does affect them. I was talking to a friend, and the friend said, I'll sell my house after the election. And I was glad because it's not too long, but and I felt that this person needed to wait, but for our own personal reasons. But to me, that wasn't for reasons that we're going to be getting into. Uh, I felt like it's a red herring to be thinking about the elections and then taking action.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much that it's to me, it's one of those things that feels like those two things should correlate. Selling my
Right.
house, making an investment, doing these things. And really, we talked a little before we jumped on the air here, and it's like, I don't think it makes any difference. One of the things, and I think you said the same thing, but so one of the things I wanted to share here is some of the data. I really
Right.
look at the data on things. And so here's a neat little thing from Dimensional Fund Advisors. It talks about presidential elections and some of the history with things. And we like to look to make a connection, and the blue bars in here are Democratic presidencies, and the red bars, of course, Republicans. And the thing I take from this is that, over time the markets go up and it kind of doesn't make any difference. I've looked at these numbers pretty closely, and there's more data behind them, of course, but like to
Yeah.
try to find out the pattern, to identify what to do about the future has so little to do with who is president. There's so many other factors. I think it says over here, there's 1,000 other factors, and that's exactly it. Like, it feels like, oh, the president's important, whether it's a Democrat or Republican or whoever's, and it's my takeaway is like, listen, over time in 20 years, based on history, you're going to have more that markets are going to be higher than where they are today. So stop trying to use this as a guessing tool for that. I don't know if you use something like similar to this when you talk with people, Bridget, but how do you handle that?
Well, it's very hard because it seems like people want it to matter, and the politicians will both on either side will have you think that it does matter. So there's a very strong story being told out there in the world that it matters. Like, who's the president matters a lot, or which party is holding Congress matters a lot in how the economy does or how the stock market does in particular. So that's another issue too, is that the economy and the stock market are two separate things. So, and they get conflated in people's minds too. And so the economy, I don't have, we're just talking about the
Yeah.
elections, and if that matters, I don't know if who the president is really affects the economy. If you get into this data points in here, that in this graph it'll show you, and it kind of doesn't matter either.
It's it's
Both parties have their good points and their bad points as far as the economy goes.
That's right. When you describe it and talk about the economy and the markets, that's probably another full discussion to
Right.
have on that, because it's really interesting how those come. As you're describing it to me, Bridget, it reminds me of now we're in football season, and the quarterback gets all this credit when his team wins, and
Right.
and when his team loses, and like, yeah, I mean, it's an important part of the whole process, right? I mean, the president's an important thing. It matters who the president, but not not that direct correlation like we might like to make with things. One,
Well, and the stock market grows over time, over a longer period of time, than even if somebody's in for two periods matters. So the
yeah.
stock market generally goes up over the course of 15 years, but over the course of 8 years, it might be flat, it might be down, when you dig into some of these numbers you see.
That's right. It's like in our world, short term is anything less than 10 years from an investing
Yeah,
standpoint, right? And that's,
right,
less than a presidency plus is a short term thing. One thing I
right,
wanted to point out on this that, um, you know, I hear a lot of people, whichever side, if the other side gets elected, here's what's going to happen. And I hear a lot of things like, well, geez, the Democrats, when they get in office there, because they focus on the environment and the social and other programs, that they're less good for the market. And it's interesting in here, and I think it's just a statistical anomaly, but you look back in the Nixon years here where the markets were flat, and then in the W. Bush years here where the markets were flat. And the evidence doesn't hold true like what typically, the Republicans are pro-business and the Democrats are less pro-business. And just factually, like, you can argue about the details about the whys are one thing, but when you look at what happens, it's like, listen, the markets go up in general. Markets go up like 75% of the time, right? And it doesn't matter who's in office.
right,
And there's one thing you shared this with me, and I think I put it on the next screen here, is another similar analogy. And what I hear people talking about is that big picture is really useful. I think, like, listen, in the big picture, any one instance is a bump in the road. But then, okay, specifically today, like, it's important to me today. I got money to invest now, or do I roll my 401k over? Do I sell my house? It's important today. And this was really interesting. I had not seen this before you shared it with, and the green year, that's the one that I focus on in this, is what's going to happen in the years after the election. So next year, what happens? And it's interesting as you go back, and again, not surprisingly, something like 2/3 or 3/4 of the time in the green years, the market's up. But what I thought was really interesting was going back into the 50s and 40s, the times when the market was not up is almost all when the Republicans were in office. And again, I don't, this is not political.
right,
This is just like factual. Like, here's the things, like, I'm surprised at that. That's not the message that I've sort of thought over years and years of, listening to the pundits. Like, I would have expected it to be the other way around. And I think, again, just a statistical anomaly, but the facts are really interesting compared to the stories. So I don't know,
right.
do you use
And
this with
if we
clients? Like,
have
what?
8 data points here, that's not enough to create
Yeah.
a trend,
Yeah.
And I just want to point out to you here that the gray bars are the average return during the election year. So the gray bars represent like 2020, like our election year now, and the green is what happens in the year after. So
Yeah.
what this says is that usually during the election year it's decent, and then usually in the year after that it's decent. So, and then sometimes it's not. So there's not a real story here.
Well,
One
that's,
thing when I was researching for this show that I did find what seems to be correlated is if the economy is down, the incumbent is less likely to get elected. Now, I don't know if you need to research data to come to that conclusion, because the state of the economy, uh, so that's the kind of thing that you might be able to find some causality with, not the stock market, which really affects a smaller subsection of people than the economy in general.
yeah.
So that's
Well,
the thing. Now,
let
go
me
ahead.
I was going to say, I'll stop. We don't know. Interesting to see those things, but so circling back to, like, sort of our premise is, why is this presidential election?
Yeah,
What's important about it for your investments? And the answer is, it's not. Like, we can't predict. We don't know. Like, it's a red. You use the word red herring, or the term red herring, right?
yeah,
Like,
and
it's
I think it's important to talk about why do we do this? Why do
yeah.
we tell these? We formulate stories, and I think this goes back to our cave person brain that's trying to figure out how to act in the world. And so we reflect on the past. We figure out a story because that's easier for our brains to remember, and then we project that story out into the future. And the story that the elections matter for my investments is it seems logical, and it seems to make emotional sense, but we don't worry about this crazy facts there.
Yeah.
But you know, we don't get
Yeah.
those because from an emotional standpoint, I think it does. It makes sense, but what we're trying to say is understand the natural, your inbred software that you have come equipped with is to tell these stories. And one of the reasons that people hire advisors like us is so that we can help them think long term. We're not People are not great long-term thinkers. That brain is not great at thinking over 10 years and over 15 years. So people like us say, okay, we're looking at the data and the data says, don't worry about this. And so it helps people to hear that from someone else. And actually, frankly, it helps us. A lot of advisors have their own advisors because it's easier to tell somebody on their own behalf. It's not because I'm so, well, I do look at this and I am smart about it, but
But yeah,
it's a
that's not the
natural
secret
human
sauce. Yeah.
tendency. Yeah, it's a natural human tendency to not be that great at long-term planning, and when your emotions are involved, be even worse, and to be depend on these stories that we tell ourselves, which are not supported by the facts in this case. And sometimes they are supported by the facts,
Yeah.
but in this case they're not.
I really appreciate that. I don't think myself about like the why do we think this sort of thing, right? I look at the facts like, no, there's reasons for these stories. And you reminded me in hearing about that, Bridget, about that our natural tendency when something's important, like the presidential election is really important, but then we try to be able to control what that means in various places in our lives. So there's other places where, hey, it's a
Right.
really important decision, and so I want to control the variables. And the idea like, oh, what, and we can measure, like one of the things in the stock market, we can measure the results, right? Other things aren't as measurable as how did the market do next year. And so it's our natural tendency to
Right.
tie those things together as you know, hey, something I can see and something that's really important, we've got to and then the reality is those things are in two separate things that, yeah, they're both important, but they don't correlate, and it's nothing we can control. It's sort of like you know, what's going to happen is going to happen independently. So that's really interesting. I appreciate that look,
Well,
that view on
yeah,
things.
I also think that we have more of a tendency to try to create these stories because there's so much input towards us, especially if you happen to be in a swing state. I don't have to tell you, John, this to you, John, that there's so many, the political advertising depends on evoking your emotions. And so your emotions are evoked. So your whole emotional system is on high alert and thinks that the election is important. And I believe the election is important, but that doesn't transfer to this conclusion that it matters for your investments.
So that sounds like a great place to wrap things up on this conversation. Is that my takeaways? You always try to get our takeaways. My takeaways are, you know, the election is important, but it's not for your investment, not
Yeah.
for your selling your house. Those we talk about things being endogenous, meaning internal decisions. Those things, you know, how you should invest, should you sell your house. That's much more important than the exogenous or external things. So my takeaway from this, for people, for our viewers, is listen, watch the election and pay attention and get out and vote for other purposes. But you know, when it comes to your money, this is just a speed bump that doesn't make a big difference, and it's nothing you can do about it, even if you knew what was going to happen. So it's interesting, but not material to your investments and your long-term financial planning. What about
Well said.
what takeaway? What
Yeah, and
takeaways?
my takeaway I think you wrapped it up really well. But the thing I liked that you said the most is please vote.
Yeah, yeah.
So don't vote on the basis of your finances, but as a country as a whole and a citizen, please vote.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and so we want to wrap things up here and say, if you enjoy these conversations and these sort of topics, one of the things Bridget and I are is members of the Alliance of Comprehensive Planners, and you can find them online at acplanners.org. And if you're looking for a financial planner that has some of these philosophies and sort of holistic, whole life components to financial planning, take a look there to find an advisor near you. And until next time, look forward to talking, Bridget.
Thanks, John.